Hi there, my name is Phil from 2020 Sounds. Thank you for clicking on our channel. Today's video is a top 5, my top 5 favourite films. When I started thinking about this and writing it down, I came up with a lot of ideas, films that I grew up with, films that I liked in my sort of teens and 20s up until now. And the more I wrote them down and crossed others out and wrote them down, I always come back to this 5, so by the simple definition they must be my top 5 favourite films. So they aren't in any order, but we've got to make a start, so we'll go with 5 first. So number 5 would be Terminator 2. Terminator 2 was released in 1991. For me personally, this film is better than the first. It's one of the few examples I can think of where a sequel is actually better than the original. This has the special effects. I've watched it very recently, and the special effects stand up just as much now, 30 years later, as they did back then. The story is brilliant. I mean, you can have a great action film, but without a good story, there isn't a lot left. I mean, I know everyone talks about today about the Avenger films and everything else, and they are great in isolation, but they're so CGI heavy, I think sometimes the story gets lost in all that. As where these films, certainly with Terminator 2, the special effects are amazing, but they don't take away from the brilliant story. It's a fantastic action film. All the Terminator films that have followed since then have been terrible. I mean, the third instalment was absolutely awful. The newer one, Dark Fate, is okay, but certainly isn't as nowhere near as Terminator 2. And I must have watched this film, I honestly don't know, I must have watched this film over 100 times. And even when I watch it now, I still love it. So it has to be one of my favourite films for that reason alone. Number 4, should we say, is 7. Released in 1995 with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. This film is as dark as they come. It's not a horror film, but it's certainly, in places, fairly horrific. It's the 7 deadly sins, which are gluttony, greed, lust, envy, sloth, wrath, and pride. There you go, a little bit of information for you. And it's amazing. The film is just, as I said before, it's incredibly dark. The whole thing is filmed either at night or during the day when it's raining, so it's very bleak. David Fincher directed it, who's one of my favourite directors. I think he's absolutely amazing, done some of my all-time favourite films. And what's brilliant about this film is that you don't see the violence, you see the aftermath of the violence and the lengths he goes to commit these 7 deadly sins, and how clever he is about how he goes about it. And the ending, which I will not ruin for you. If you've not seen the film, please watch this film. I mean, the ending is amazing, because it's sadly one of those films is that once you've seen the ending, you can never have that same feeling again, because the ending is so immense. It really sort of showcases the whole film, so it's fantastic. Little interesting fact about this film, Kevin Spacey is the villain in this, which I probably now ruined it for you, but even still. Kevin Spacey is the villain in this, and he done a film before this which he won an Oscar for, and he didn't want to be named as being the villain because everyone would watch it based on his Oscar performance. But he's in it, and he's amazing in it. He's only in it for a handful of scenes, but he's fantastic in it. So that's number 4, 7. Number 3, let's go with number 3 then. So we go with Labyrinth. Labyrinth was released in 1986, and an embarrassing story for you about this film. I got given the choice of going to either see Santa, go and see Father Christmas, or going to the cinema, and I chose to go to the cinema, and this is the film we watched, and that was in 1986. I was 8 then, probably too old for Father Christmas. So yeah, and I probably, this, of all the films that I've listed here, this is probably the film that I've seen the most. It's just I said before about CGI, and kids' films nowadays are also CGI heaven. Even all the new Disney films have now gone to CGI. This is through puppets, through Jim Henson, and also George Lucas was involved in this. And the best advocate for this film is that David Bowie is in it, and he is amazing in this film. It tells the story of Sarah. She wishes that her brother Toby is taken by the Goblin King, which is played by David Bowie, and he then takes her, and she has 12 hours to get him back to go for the labyrinth, and she meets some weird and wonderful people along the way. Hoggle, Ludo. It sounds weird, trust me, it's not. Well, it is a little weird, but it's just an absolutely magical film. You just transport yourself back to, for me, I go back to childhood, and every time I watch it, I still enjoy it just as much. So that's Labyrinth. Number 2, should we say? Let's go with number 2. True Romance. True Romance was released in 1993, and it was written by Quentin Tarantino before he directed Pulp Fiction and become the famous person that he is today. Directed by Tony Scott, who directed Top Gun, and again probably is one of my favourite actors, sadly passed away now. But this film has got so many actors in it. It's got like Val Kilmer, Patricia Arquette, Christian Slater, Christopher Walken, Dennis Hopper, Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman is only in this film for 2 scenes. He plays a black pimp, even though he's white, and he's probably got one of the best scenes in this film. Another great scene in this film is when, I'll explain it a little bit. Christian Slater, for his birthday, gets given a birthday present, which is a call girl, Alabama. And she's only been a call girl for 4 days. And they meet up, and he says, well, stop being a call girl now, go and get your stuff. She's owned by this guy called Drexel, Gary Oldman, who's a pimp. They have a little altercation, shall we say, and he then takes something that he shouldn't take, accidentally, and then it's just this mad ride for the next hour and a half. Mob bosses, mafia, it's phenomenal. It's just a brilliant, brilliant film. Brad Pitt's in this film, only for, I think, 2 scenes. He plays a stone surfer. So, I mean, what's not to love? So that's True Romance, amazing film. And the soundtrack, brilliant. The soundtrack, I had the soundtrack, I bought it when it first came out, and I still listen to it today. So that's what, nearly 30 years later. So brilliant, that's True Romance. And then number 1, shall we say, it's probably not number 1, but they're all in sort of random order, but they're my top 5 films. Number 1, Man on Fire, which has got Denzel Washington and Crystal Walken in, and Dakota Fanning, and it's amazing. It's really a story about love and hope, really, because John Creasy, who's played by Denzel Washington, he's an ex-CIA agent, washed up, had obviously a terrible time and really not fit for much, but he's given this job by Crystal Walken to protect Peter, and who's this little girl in Mexico, and he becomes her bodyguard. She gets snatched for hostage money because they become from quite an affluent family. She gets snatched, and it's his job to get her back. And what's great about the film is before she gets snatched, there's this great build-up as how he finds himself again through caring for this little girl, and they develop this relationship. So when she is snatched, it almost feels like he's had his daughter taken away. So when he does go out to find her, there's this great vengeance, and you can really, it's probably difficult to say, but you can really justify the violence in the film. And there's some brilliant scenes in this film, absolutely amazing scenes. And Christopher Walken in this film is great. So that's it, really, my top 5 films. I've put all the IMDb links into the section below, so you can click on them, click on the trailers. I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know if you agree. I'd love to know if you've seen any of the films, and if you agree that they will probably be some of your top films. So let me know your thoughts. We'd obviously love to know if you could subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel. Go on. Thank you very much. Take care.